Good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. This quarter, we're going to be looking at the book of Judges. And this is an interesting book. Before we talk too much about Judges, though, let's look at verse 1 of the book of Judges. Verse 1 says, "After the death of Joshua, the people inquired to the Lord, 'Who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them?'" All right, so we have the book of Judges starting with the death of Joshua, okay? Last quarter, Frank was teaching on Galatians. The quarter before that, I think it was the quarter before that, we talked about the book of Joshua. Okay, so what I'd like to do is take a few minutes and try to remind ourselves some of the things we talked about the book of Joshua, and that'll help us get our minds right to kind of go into the book of Judges. Okay, so Frankie has mics. Something you know about the book of Judges, whether you're in my class or not, or something you remember us talking about from the book of Joshua, Just remind ourselves what's been happening with the story of the children of Israel to where we are now. All right, how about this? Who was Joshua? Let's start there. Apparently, we need to get a better Bible class teacher in here. All right, Scott.
To be fair, I wasn't in your class.
Oh, okay,
you were Joshua. So, but if memory serves me correct, Joshua was the servant of Moses, or at least some kind of a helper of Moses of some sorts. And he ended up taking over whenever Moses was. After Moses had died.
Okay, so we have sort of a trend here of it's not that uncommon for books to, especially in the Old Testament, to begin with the death of someone, right? So we had, I think Exodus began with the death of Joseph. Then we had Joshua beginning with the death of Moses, and then it was going to be Joshua's turn to step up and take over and lead the people. What was Joshua tasked with? Because that's pretty important to what we're going to talk about tonight.
Crossing the Jordan.
All right, he was supposed to cross the Jordan River and do what? He was supposed to claim the land and have it distributed among the people according to the way it was supposed to under Moses, okay? So that's what happens, and then, Joshua spent a good part of his life preparing to take over for Moses. Then he does. God tells him, remember, to be strong and courageous, do not be afraid. And that was sort of the theme of the book that we talked about there, and how they went from place to place, conquering and claiming the land of Canaan. Now, if you remember, the first time the children of Israel went to the land of Canaan, they went with Moses, and what happened the first time they got there? Backing up before Joshua.
They sent out, or Moses had sent out the 12 spies, and
Joshua was one of those spies. Yep.
Yeah, Joshua and Caleb were the only two that came back and said that this is our land, let's go in and take it. And the rest of them were discouraged because of the giants in the land. And ultimately, God says, no, you're not going to go. and I didn't know how far into that you want.
No, you're good. This is great. Yeah. And so, all right, so that happens. They go in, they start claiming the land. They have victories at Jericho. They have some defeats along the way when they lose faith or sin or whatever it is. But when God is with them, God actually at one point starts fighting for them. And they're practically conquering these armies without even losing soldiers because God is on their side and God is fighting for them. Okay? And that sort of sets the stage now. All right, so the massive conquest fighting is over. People are supposed to now settle, occupy their land, and drive people out of the land of Canaan. God commanded them to drive them out. Okay, and that's sort of where we're starting here. So this is why in verse 1, it says, after the death of Joshua, the people of Israel inquired of the Lord, who shall go up first against the Canaanites to fight against them? The Lord said, Judah shall go up. Behold, I have given the land into his hand. Okay, so God said, the people are like, oh no, Joshua's gone. So what now? God says, it's fine. Judah's going to go. And it's already done. I've delivered the land into their hands. They basically just have to have faith and go take it. Okay? Let's have somebody, if they would, read verses 3 through 7.
Three through 7?
3 through 7, please. Yes, sir.
All right, I was in Joshua at first. I thought you were reading it wrong. She had to correct me.
Oh, okay. Okay.
3 through 7. And Judah said to Simeon his brother, come up with me into the territory allotted to me, that we may fight against the Canaanites. And I likewise will go with you into the territory allotted to you. So Simeon went with him. Then Judah went up, and the Lord gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand. And they defeated 10,000 of them at Bezek. They found Adonai-Bezek at Bezek and fought against him and defeated the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Adonai-Bezek fled, but they pursued him and caught him and cut off his thumbs and his big toes. And Adonai-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and their big toes cut off used to pick up scraps under my table, as I have done. So God has repaid me. And they brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there.
All right, so as you can see right here out of the gate, they're having some early success, okay? They join up, so we got some good things happening here. We've got Judah and Simeon making an agreement, hey, we're going to work together, we're going to look out for each other, and we're going to have faith in God, and we're going to go do this thing. They do that, they join up, they go, they conquer. I'm going to say Bezek. At least that's why I've been saying it in my mind when I've been reading it. Now I'm trying to say it out loud. It's different. But you're probably right. I don't know. But they do that. They conquer it. And then there's an interesting thing here where it says that the leader there, Adonai-Bezek, and the reason he's Adonai-Bezek is because he was the lord of Bezek, the place, the city, the powerful group of people there. Okay, so they go, they conquer him, and they cut off his thumbs and his big toes. So, one thing right here. The book of Judges is a little bit of a dark book, okay? We're going to be studying a period of time that is not necessarily good for the children of Israel. In fact, one of the things I was reading, it called it, basically was saying that we're going to be studying generational degeneration. And that's sort of what we see throughout this book. But Why do you think they wanted to cut off the thumbs and the big toes of Adonai-Bezek?
So he couldn't get away.
All right, can't run away. If you don't have big toes, it'd be pretty hard to flee, okay? So that would be the toes. What about the thumbs? Couldn't hold a weapon. It'd be real hard to fight if you can't do that, okay? Now, they didn't kill him. They took him back to Jerusalem. Why do you think they would have wanted to do that? All right, I'm going to go ahead and throw out there, probably as a message to the other people around, that this is what's going to happen. They're not playing around, okay? Now, we look at that and we're like, that's really harsh. Why are they doing that? And one of the things that people will say and try to argue is, well, why would God want the children of Israel to go and drive out and wipe out the people that live in this land? Why would a loving God do something like that? How does that work out? How does that compute? Well, in the Old Testament, well, really in Old and New Testament, it's not that uncommon for God to raise up a group of people to punish another group of people, or in this case, several groups of people. So we saw with the Egyptians, right? They were to punish and oppress the children of Israel for wrongdoing that they had done. We've got Babylonian captivities and things like that we see throughout the Old Testament. Remember, not that long ago, I was teaching a class in here on Habakkuk, and that's one of the things we were talking about leading up. It was the time leading up to them being told that they were about to be getting wiped out and punished. It was going to be terrible what the Babylonians were going to come do to them, okay? So that's what's happening here. God is using the children of Israel to wipe out and remove, to clear out an evil, sinful people. And you see that right here with what Adonai-Bezek says. Like, this terrible thing happens to him. They do this terrible thing to him, but also he says what? Basically, I've done this to 70 other people, and now God has done to me what I've done to all these other people. Basically, he says 70, maybe 70 is a made-up number, maybe it's just a number to say so many people, so many other leaders that I've conquered, and I've cut off their thumbs and their big toes, and I've made them completely reliant on what I do or do not want to give them, to feed them or whatever, table scraps, that sort of thing. So this was not a good guy, okay? The people that lived in this land were evil people. And we see that too in the book of Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy chapter 9, verses 4 through 6, let's see what God has to say about the people in the land of Canaan. Starting verse 4, it says, "Do not say in your heart, after the Lord your God has thrust them out," talk about the different groups of people, the peoples of the land of Canaan, "after I've thrust them out before you, it is because of my righteousness that the Lord has brought me into possession of this land. Whereas it is because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is driving them out before you. Not because of your righteousness or your uprightness of your heart are you going to possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations, the Lord your God is driving them out from before you, and that he may confirm the word that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Know therefore that the Lord your God is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stubborn people," right? So God is keeping his promise. He said, I'm going to make this your land. And he is also punishing the evilness and the wickedness that is found there. You can also turn to Deuteronomy chapter 18. It'll go into a little bit more in depth about the evilness of these people in this land. Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 14. says, when you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominable practices of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens, or a sorcerer or a charmer or a medium or a necromancer, or one who inquires of the dead. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. And because of these abominations, the Lord your God is driving them out from before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God, for these nations which you are about to dispossess listen to the fortune tellers and to the diviners, but as for you, the Lord your God has not allowed you to do this. All right, so God has told them long before they got here, you're going to wipe these people out, completely drive them out of the land, get all of the sin out of the country, and do not fall into the practices of these people. So I just want to take a second to kind of look at that, because that is something that, it seems a little weird when you look at, the types of stuff that we're going to look at in the book of Judges, because this is a pretty dark book. All right. Any thoughts or comments about that? We talk a lot about like idol worship and things like that, but they would offer their children as sacrifices and just terrible, terrible things. And God's just telling them, do not be any part of this, and I'm going to use you to go punish these people for the evil that they are doing. Okay? All right, would somebody please read verses 8 through 18. And we're going to look at some more continued success early on here with the children of Israel. Don't everybody volunteer at once. We'll all get your turn.
Judges 1, right?
Yes, Judges chapter 1, verses 8 through 18.
Now the children of Judah fought against Jerusalem and took it. They struck it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire. And afterward, the children of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites who dwelled in the mountains, in the south, and in the lowland. Then Judah went up against the Canaanites who dwelt in Hebron. Now the name of Hebron was formerly Kirjath Arba, and they killed Shishaiah, Ahiman, and Talmaiah. From there they went against the inhabitants of Debir. The name of Debir was formerly Kirjath Sepher. Then Caleb said, whoever attacks Kirjath Sepher and takes it, to him I will give my daughter Asha as wife. And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, took it. So he gave him his daughter Asha as wife. Now it happened when she came to him that she urged him to ask her father for a field. And she dismounted from her donkey, and Caleb said to her, what do you wish? So she said to him, give me a blessing, since you have given me land in the south. Give me also springs of water. And Caleb gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. Now the children of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up from the city of Palms with the children of Judah into the wilderness of Judah, which lies in the south near Arad. And they went and dwelt among the people. And Judah went with his brother Simeon, and they attacked the Canaanites who inhabited Zephath and utterly destroyed it. So the name of the city was called Hormah. Also Judah took Gaza with its territory, Ashkelon with its territory, Ekron with its territory. Through 18? Okay.
Excuse me, had a little coughing fit there. All right, so we see that they're having some success here. They go, they attack Jerusalem, they conquer it, then they travel down, and down doesn't mean like south. It means Jerusalem was a higher elevation, and they traveled down to the lower lying lands around it and started conquering those cities. Then they fought against the Canaanites. They won in the hill country, in the Negev, and in the coastal area. Andrew, could you hit 13 and enter? All right, so you can't see this too well, but this is a map sort of the area that we're talking about. You see some of the names that we just saw, like Debir, Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod. These are all some of the names we're going to see today. Jerusalem and Jericho, or the city of palms, as it's referred to there. Shiloh, all these different places. This is sort of the area we're talking about. So they were in Jerusalem, then they came down and started conquering the places around it. And then here's another sort of different map of this. This is more showing where oppression would come from later. But you see some of the cities we were talking about and that we're looking at here and what that looks like. Andrew, go back to slide 5, enter. All right, so that's what happened there, okay? So, again, we see two of the tribes joining together, working together. They have faith in God. They're trying to accomplish what God has told them to do. Things are going well. They're winning. They're conquering, wiping people out. Until verse 19. And in verse 19, everything's going to change. And it's going to start sort of a down spiral that we'll see for the rest of this chapter. Okay? Verse 19 says, "And the Lord was with Judah, and he took possession of the hill country, but he could not drive out the inhabitants of the plains because they had chariots of iron." Okay, so now we've got a situation where things are going well, and all of a sudden they're not. Any thoughts or comments about this? Does that sound weird, unusual? It's going to start a pattern, a big pattern, and we're going to look out throughout this book. Okay, so absolutely, it's going to start a pattern. What else, Andrew? I think you need to turn on the other box behind you. Testing.
I thought it was interesting that it said the Lord was with Judah, but then they end up losing. I think that's an interesting spin of events, I guess.
Yeah.
Typically, you don't see the Lord is with someone and then they lose.
Yeah. All right, so the Lord was with them and wanted them to conquer this area, but they couldn't. All right, Kelly?
I could be wrong, but it almost seems to me that maybe they were doubting him because they were like, oh, what did it say? It was made of iron.
The chariots of
yeah.
iron, okay.
And so I feel like they might have seen that and began to doubt God and his ability to fight with them, and despite all the wins that they've had. Like, I think that's just a very common thing throughout the Bible is once you start doubting in God and you start losing faith, then he kind of backs up and lets things fail for you.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's exactly what's happening here. They're doing fine. They're doing exactly what God told them to do. And then all of a sudden they see chariots of iron and they're like, I don't know if God can help us do that. And that's the same, again, think about all of the amazing things we talked about in the book of Joshua. God parted the Jordan River, okay, helped them get across there. They defeated Jericho without even fighting. And then somebody got greedy and wanted to take some of the spoils of war so they lose the next battle, right? But then they figure that situation out, and then God is with them, and God actually starts fighting for them, and it's crazy. It's almost crazy to think about this group of people here getting to this and thinking, I don't think God can do that. But at the same time, if you look at it from a human standpoint, a worldly standpoint, they could not win that fight. They did not have iron. This other people had iron. They had chariots of iron. So from a simply military standpoint, whatever, they shouldn't have been able to win this fight. But they also shouldn't have been able to conquer Jericho without even fighting. Right? Because they had God on their side. They forgot that they had God with them and that God was going to make this happen. God told them in verse 2 of the book of Judges, he says, I've given the land into your hands. You just have to go take it pretty much. Also, if you look at Joshua 17 through 18, jump over there real quick. All right, it says, Then Joshua said to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, you are a numerous and a great... Did I put the wrong verse? Oh, yeah, no, this is right. Sorry, I looked wrong at first. Then Joshua said to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, you are a numerous people and have great power. You shall not have you shall not have one allotment only. But the hill country shall be yours, for though it is a forest, you shall clear it and possess it to the farthest borders. You shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have chariots of iron, and they are strong. So this should not have been a surprise to them when they got there and they saw these chariots of iron, because God said, even though they've got chariots of iron, you've got me. But all of a sudden they get there and they start to see those chariots of iron, and obviously they're doubting, and it doesn't go well for them. It almost seems like they don't even try. Any thoughts or comments about that?
A thought came across my mind. Do we know of what type of weapons the Israelites had at this point in time?
I want to say bronze, because bronze is weaker than iron. I'd have to look into that to know for sure, but I want to say that that's right. I want to say, when I was reading about this, I want to say everybody around had bronze. That was common, but only certain groups of people had iron. They're the only ones that had figured it out, and I think part of the reason they were able to make it was because they were able to get certain things from the Philistines and other areas and be able to make the iron, because iron is stronger. Regardless, whatever they had was not as strong and tough as iron. So they had a weaker metal. They did not have the means or the knowledge of how to make iron to be competitive with that sense. But again, the point of what we're looking at here is it shouldn't have mattered. They should have been able to go down there with plastic forks and win that fight, because God was on their side. I mean, if you think about this situation, you think about like David and Goliath, right? Everybody was terrified of Goliath. David said, just give me 5 stones and a sling. God's got this. So they should have had that mentality, but they didn't. And because of that, and because of their lack of faith, the bronze mattered when it shouldn't have, or the iron mattered when it shouldn't have.
I also think it's very important for us to remember that in our day-to-day life, because it's really easy to, at least for me, try to fight my own battles and get through things on my own, but God does have all of our backs even today, and while we may not be successful with everything that we do, like, God is still supporting us and is rooting for us as well.
Absolutely. That's a good point. I love studying the Old Testament. I'm one of, I think, the few people that do. That's one of the reasons why we study the Old Testament, is because it gives us a more full picture and understanding of who God is, and how we, just like them, need to rely on God's strength. although our eyes and our ears and our senses get in the way and distract us or confuse us or make us think, I can't do that, or whatever, you know what I mean? Or that, I can't handle this, but, we've got to be able to give that over to God. There's lots of applications to today, and we'll talk about some of those as we go through here. Anything else? All right, and then in verses 20 and 21, we see in Hebron was given to Caleb, as Moses had said, and he drove out from it the 3 sons of Anak. But the people of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites have lived with the people in Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day. Okay? So now we start to see, again, this decline here. It all started when they ran into chariots of iron. Now we've got Benjamin not getting rid of the people that are there completely and allowing them to stay, or not being able to, or whatever the case be. And then we see sort of another success here in verses 24 or 22 through 26. It says the house of Joseph. Now, when it says the house of Joseph, they're talking about Ephraim and Manasseh. So it's 2 tribes. So again, we have 2 tribes working together and having faith in God. And it says, the house of Joseph also went up against Bethel, and the Lord was with them. And the house of Joseph scouted out Bethel. Now the name of the city was formerly Luz. And the spies saw a man coming out of the city, and they said to him, please show us the way into the city, and we will deal with you kindly. And he showed them the way into the city, and they struck the city with the edge of the sword. But they let the man and all his family go. And the man went to the land of the Hittites and built a city and called its name Luz. This is its name to this day. All right, so they sort of have a success there. Again, they were working together. They must have had faith in God. God made this work out. They were able to find through this person a secret passage into the city, help them go in, conquer it, and they let this man and his family live. Now, again, we're going to see more of the decline. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit more for sake of time here. 27 through 30. Manasseh did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shean and its villages, or Taanach and its villages, or the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, or the inhabitants of Beliam and its villages, or the inhabitants of Megiddo and its villages, for the Canaanites persisted in dwelling in that land. Now, this is where it gets interesting right here in verse 28. Pay attention to this, okay? When Israel grew strong, so I guess they weren't strong enough, which A, shouldn't have been a thing because God, but B, when they felt they were at a strength where they could do something, listen to what they do. It says, when Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not drive them out completely. All right, so now they're not really even trying to drive people out of the land. Now they're just saying, okay, now that we're strong enough, we can control these people. This will be great for us. We can make them go to work for us. Keep going. It says, and Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer. So the Canaanites lived in Gezer among them. Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kiltron, or the inhabitants of Nahalal. So the Canaanites lived among them, but became subject to forced labor. So now all the other tribes are doing this. They're not getting rid of people. They're just forcing them into labor. And basically, it is a repetition of that all the way down until you get to the tribe of Dan. And when you get to the tribe of Dan, it gets even worse, because now they're not even partially winning. Now Dan gets driven out and they are hiding out in the wilderness. So you see like the constant decline of what was supposed to happen here and what it has turned into. And that's going to take us into chapter 2, and I want to make sure we look at this before we run out of time. So if somebody would, I want somebody else to please read verses 1 through 5 of chapter 2 of the book of Judges.
The angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, I brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land that I swore to give to your forefathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall not make a covenant with the people of this land, but you shall break down their altars. How far you want me to go?
Actually, you know what? Stop. You can stop right there. And I'll get somebody else to read 3 through 5 in a second, but I want to make a point right here. So, it's interesting to me when I see this, and you look and it says, what God says. So this is basically God's response, is what we're looking at. The first 5 verses is basically God's response to everything that's happened. It's interesting, one of the first things he says is, I said, I will never break my covenant with you. Who is breaking the covenant? They are. They're not doing what God told them to do. It says, he goes on, it says, you shall make no covenants with these people. You shall not. And so some of these were forcing them into labor. Some of them had them paying tribute or taxes to them, all these different things. So they're making covenants, they're making agreements with these people. They're not removing the people from the land, which means they're not removing the sin from the land, right? And he says, you were supposed to go in and not make any covenants with the inhabitants of the land, and you were supposed to go break down all their altars and everything, okay? Now somebody pick up where it's, but then it says, but you have not obeyed my voice. What is this that you have done? Okay? So I told you exactly what to do. I told you I'd already given you the land. You were supposed to have faith and go do it. And instead, you have varying degrees of, well, I know God wants us to get rid of these people, but we could make some money off of these people, and that would be better for us, right? We should do that. We know better than God in this situation. Or they just didn't have faith to go fight and conquer and do what they were supposed to do. Okay? Somebody else, please read 3 through 5 for us.
So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your sides, and their God shall be a snare to you. As soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, people lifted up their voices and wept. And they called the name of that place Bochim, and they sacrificed there to the Lord.
All right. So basically God says, look, you've done this to yourself, and now you're going to have to live with the consequences. Okay? You should have done it when I was with you. Now they are going to stay. They will be a thorn in your side, and you're going to reap the consequences of not following me here. But you see the progression of these people through this situation. You see, at first they have full faith in God. It's going well. Then you sort of see a partial faith, and then you see a partial faith leading to partial obedience, where they're sort of they've conquered the people, but they didn't drive them out, right? But all of that equals disobedience to God. God's like, I'm not going to have this. Partial faith is not good enough. Partial obedience is not good enough. You didn't do what I said you were going to do, and now they are going to be a thorn in your side, and that is going to be the start of the cycle that we're going to see throughout throughout the rest of the book of Judges, pretty much. And this is the cycle that, like, I called it break the cycle, because you as we read through here, you're just so badly going to want the children of Israel to break this cycle, but they're going to continue to sort of just, like I said, a generational degeneration. They're going to continue to get further and further away from God. Even the judges or saviors, because really what the judges are, they're saviors. They cry out to God. God sends them a savior, and they do okay for a little bit. But even the judges, as we will see, they'll kind of get worse and worse and worse as we go through as well. But this is the basic kind of cycle we're going to see. They start off serving the Lord. They do evil. The Lord punishes them. They cry out for help. God sends them a savior. The land is peaceful for a little bit while they're serving God. Then they sin. Then God punishes them. Then they cry out for a savior. And this is sort of the cycle or downturn that we're going to see of the children of Israel over and over and over again. And I think when you look at applications for us, and I'm going to talk a little bit in my Devo tonight, but just there's so many applications here, like Kelly was saying. We need to fully trust God. They did not trust God. They did not fully have faith in God. They did not fully obey God. And that's something we definitely need to watch out for in our lives today. And say that again? Sounds like America as a whole? Absolutely. You can look at a nation. I'm going to make an argument later. We could look at your own life. I could look at my life and see this cycle, right? Potentially. So it's definitely a great point, though, because it's just this cycle of, you just, as you're going to be like, just stop, guys, just obey. But obviously it's not that simple for them. But it could have been if they had wiped all the sin and the evil out of the land, then they wouldn't be tempted and have all of the trouble that we're going to see them spiral down into. Any other thoughts or comments? All right, well, Scott.
I'm sorry, I was trying to think of where this was at earlier when you was talking about why the children of Israel are going into the land and basically killing off, or told to kill off all these people. Mm-hmm. And I know you've thrown up other passages in Deuteronomy and such. But if we go all the way back to Genesis, in Genesis chapter 15, when God is basically confirming the covenant with Abraham, when he splits the animals in halves and all that. But starting in verse 14, God speaking to Abraham says, "And also the nation whom they serve, I will judge. Afterward, they shall come out no, that's talking about the Israelites coming out of Egypt. But in the fourth generation, they shall return here," talking about the land of Canaan, "for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete." And so essentially when God called Abraham to that land to show him that land and give him the promise of the land, he's telling Abraham here, the iniquity of the Amorites isn't complete yet. They still had time, basically, right? But God, being all-knowing, knew that what was going to happen. He's like, that's going to come to an end, and here it is. It's supposed to be coming to an end, but the Israelites are not completing their task.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that Scott brought that out. It also helped me remember something else I wanted to say. Great point, Scott. Here's something I find, when you study, you find really fascinating things. To me, this is fascinating. To y'all might think, you're making a big deal out of this, Jeremy, and it's nothing. But one thing I wanted to point out here, it says, "Now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim." And the name Bochim just means it's because they wept and cried there. But here's what I think is interesting. Real quick, let's turn to Joshua chapter 4, verse 19. All right. Now, if you can do this on your own because we don't have time right now, but if you start reading in verse 19 all the way through chapter 5, what's interesting here is this is the first place they make camp after God parts the Jordan River. This is Joshua now, bringing them into the land for the first time. God holds back the water. Remember, they've got the Ark of the Covenant in the middle, and it's like 10 miles, or I can't remember what we said. It's a long way wide. They go in. Then they bring out 12 stones from the center, the bottom of the river, and they stack them up, and they make an altar there, or a statue, or whatever. And he tells them there, he said, this is why you're doing this. When your children ask you why these stones are here, you're going to tell them what God has done for you and how he has led you, and so on and so forth. So to me, it's really interesting. Again, maybe it's nothing, but the angel of the Lord came from there to talk to them and basically just let them have it. Maybe it's nothing. I think it's fascinating that that's the place. And also, right after that, and if you look in chapter 5, Joshua goes out from Gilgal, just a little bit of the area around it, and that's when the angel of the Lord talks to him there. So, I don't know. I may be making a big old deal out of nothing, but it's neat. And stuff like that when you're studying the Bible is just fascinating to me. Anyway, I appreciate your attention. We're out of time. Same bat time, same bat channel next week.